Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Beyond World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shubhan Chandna.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, India has recalled 6 Indian diplomats, including the High Commissioner. And this comes after they were named as persons of interest by Canada in its probe in the killing of pro-Khalistani terrorists. Now, India called these accusations false and baseless. We will discuss more on the show today.
Also on World DNA, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected accusations that Israeli troops targeted UNIFIL peacekeepers in Lebanon and has further repeated a call for them to be withdrawn from the combat zones. This as Israeli forces tightened their squeeze around Jabalia in northern Gaza. We'll be tracking the latest on the West Asian front as well. Let's start with the headlines. This is World DNA.
Suicide bombers dressed as women in burqas kill 4 people at remote police base in Pakistan. This as Islamabad is under strict security lockdown ahead of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
India-Canada diplomatic face-off escalates in Niger case. New Delhi expels 6 Canadian diplomats, recalls its High Commissioner and key diplomats from Canada.
United Nations peacekeepers to stay in all positions in Lebanon despite Israeli calls for them to move, says the UN peacekeeping chief.
More than 20 killed in an Israeli airstrike on the city of Atu on northern Lebanon, says Lebanese health officials. First such strike in northern part of Lebanon.
European Union imposes sanctions against prominent Iranian officials and entities over transfer of missiles and drones for Russia to use against Ukraine.
The Nigerian national football team will boycott their 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier in Libya. Their squad claims they were subjected to inhumane treatment at an airport in Libya. A day after the Iran-backed group's drone attack on an Israeli base killed 4 soldiers and wounded dozens, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to hit Hezbollah without mercy.
Now, he said Israel will continue to mercilessly attack and strike Hezbollah in all parts of Lebanon. That includes Beirut. Netanyahu said it during a visit to the base hit by Hezbollah near Binyamina in northern Israel.
I want to clarify, we will continue to mercilessly strike Hezbollah in all parts of Lebanon, including Beirut. All this according to operational considerations. We have proven it recently and we will continue to prove it in the days to come.
The Israeli Defense Forces said it was targeting how the drone evaded its sophisticated air defense systems and hit the Golani Brigade training facility south of Haifa. Israel Army released footage of what it said are members of the Golani Brigade during military operations in southern Lebanon.
Israeli soldier Amitai Alon, who was killed with 3 others in the drone attack, was buried on Monday with mourners crying over his coffin, wrapped in an Israeli flag in northern Israel's Agamon Hula. Prior to Netanyahu's comments, new airstrikes against targets.
These are targets, of course, in Lebanon, including one in a northern Christian majority town of Atu, which killed at least 21 people on Monday. According to Atu Mayor, the house hit in the Israeli strike had been rented to displaced families.
Furthermore, Israeli army released footage of what it said was a Hezbollah underground compound in southern Lebanon. Israeli army spokesperson Admiral Daniel Hagari, commenting from inside the tunnel, said the alleged compound was intended for Hezbollah to do a larger scale of massacre than the 7th of October.
We're now in the bunker that we found underneath a Lebanese house in a Shia village only a couple of kilometers from our border. This bunker was ready for WION forces, for a battalion of WION forces to enter into this bunker and do a raid into Israel and do a larger scale of massacre than the 7th of October. They were planned with the motorcycles here to go to Kiryat Shmona, to Iftach, to villages and positions inside Israel and conduct a massacre.
As Israel presses its campaign against Hezbollah militants in southern Lebanon, the United Nations Security Council voiced strong concerns after several UN peacekeeping positions in southern Lebanon came under fire. The UN peacekeeping chief said United Nations peacekeepers will stay in all positions in Lebanon despite Israeli calls for them to move.
The decision was made that UNIFIL would currently stay in all its position in spite of the calls that were made by the Israeli Defense Forces to vacate the position that are in the vicinity of the Blue Line.
Though the Israeli Prime Minister has rejected accusations that Israeli troops deliberately targeted UNIFIL peacekeepers in Lebanon as completely false and repeated a call for them to be withdrawn from combat zones.
Hezbollah uses UNIFIL facilities and positions as cover while it attacks Israeli cities and communities. These attacks have claimed the lives of many Israelis, including yesterday.
In Gaza, the Palestinian Ministry of Health said the Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinians, including a teenager in the West Bank city of Jenin, which has seen repeated military raids. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the large number of civilian casualties in the intensifying Israeli campaign in northern Gaza.
Meanwhile, in Iraq, the funeral procession was carried out for Iranian Revolutionary Guard General Abbas Nilforoushan, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike alongside Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah. Staying in West Asia, Israel has been continuing with its ground operations in northern Gaza.
Well, in the latest, Israeli artillery killed at least 10 people queuing for food, and this is according to the Palestinian medics. The forces also instructed people to evacuate as they pushed against Hamas militants. More in this next report.
Displaced Palestinians woke up to their tents on fire in the early hours of Monday after an Israeli airstrike hit Al-Aqsa Hospital in central Gaza. Medics reported several people killed and dozens of others wounded. I swear there's no safety, whether it's a hospital, a school or any place, this woman said. Nearly 5 days ago they hit a school and today they hit the tents. As you see, what can we do? Israel's military said it struck militants operating from a command center inside the compound. It accuses Hamas of using civilian facilities for military purposes, which Hamas denies. The strike came as Israeli forces widened their raid into northern Gaza. Residents said the military had isolated several areas in the far north of the enclave, including Jabalia, Gaza's largest historic refugee camp. As strikes continued, medics were seen rushing wounded Palestinians to Kamal Adwan Hospital in Jabalia on Sunday. The Israeli military said earlier that it had ordered evacuations in areas including Kamal Adwan Hospital. 9 days into a major Israeli operation in northern Gaza, the Hamas-run Gaza government media office said Israeli strikes had killed around 300 Palestinians there. It said Israel's bombardment of civilian houses and displacement shelters was intended to force residents to leave Gaza once and for all, which Israel denies. Palestinian and United Nations officials say there are no safe areas in the enclave. They're also worried about severe shortages of food, fuel and medical supplies in northern Gaza, saying there's a risk of famine there. An Israeli military statement on Sunday said forces operating throughout the Gaza Strip in the past 24 hours had attacked about 40 targets and killed dozens of militants.
In yet another dramatic escalation of tensions between India and Canada, India has now expelled 6 Canadian diplomats from India, including the acting High Commissioner Stuart Ross-Wheeler.
Right, and earlier in the day, it had recalled its High Commissioner and key diplomats from Canada. This after they were named as persons of interest in the killing of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was gunned down by masked men outside a Gurdwara in British Columbia in June 2023.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian diplomats of engaging in activities that he said posed a significant threat to public safety.
I believe India has made a monumental mistake in choosing to use their diplomats and organized crime to attack Canadians, to come and make Canadians feel unsafe here at home, and even more so, to create acts of violence and even homicide. This is unacceptable.
Trudeau's statement came after the Canadian police said on Monday that it has significant amount of information on criminal activity being orchestrated by agents of the Indian government. In an official response, India called the allegations preposterous and ascribed them to the political agenda of Trudeau's government. New Delhi highlighted that Ottawa has failed to provide any evidence since making allegations against Indian officials with regards to the murder of Nijjar more than a year ago. This despite multiple requests. Further, it listed multiple instances since 2018 as evidence of Trudeau's hostility towards India.
Earlier, India's foreign ministry summoned Canada's top diplomat. He was told that in the atmosphere of extremism and violence prevailing in Canada, the Trudeau government's actions endangered the safety of India's diplomats. The decision to recall its top diplomat and other targeted officials was also communicated. All right, to discuss this further, we are now being joined by Terry Mili, who is a journalist and also the author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. Mr. Mili, thank you so much for joining us. Now, of course, there has been no mention till now about the Khalistani elements, which still receive and have a safe haven very much there in Canada. And also at this point, when Trudeau says that, Indian diplomats are posing a threat to public safety, there is no mention of the kind of threat which is there to Hindus and Indian nationals in Canada, owing to the Khalistani elements, which still have a safe haven there. I just wanted to understand your assessment on this to begin with.
Well, I noticed the same absence of comment. The RCMP and tonight the Prime Minister have completely flipped the script, the traditional script on who we should see as the bad guy. Traditionally, we've been instructed to consider that the Khalistanis are the ones using violence and that we must go after them and try to stop them. And now we are being told that no, it's the Indian government that is the problem. They're the ones using violence against these poor, defenseless, persecuted Khalistanis. I exaggerate, but only a little. You noticed, and you were correct, that we didn't talk about the savage history of violence on the part of the Khalistanis in Canada and, of course, beyond. Need I even mention the Air India bombing of 1985? 231 completely innocent civilians blown out of the sky for nothing. What about the relentless beatings of their critics, beating of Balraj Diol, the beating of Ujjal Dosanjh, and on, the death threats? I've had my share, others have had it far worse. And these threats continue on the part of the Khalistani element against those who would criticize them, particularly for their violence. So this presents us a very strange picture. And it suggests to me that what's happened is that the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau has been spun. They have been persuaded by skilled lobbyists, and they are they're very well skilled, for the Khalistan movement in Canada,
yes,
the Sikh organization and others, they have been persuaded to believe that they don't know about the 20,000 people who died in the desperately violent insurgency in Punjab in the 1980s and early 90s. They don't know the history. They have been persuaded that the problem here is the Indian government. They're the bad guys. And that's something new.
Mr. Miliuski, just now shifting focus to the internal politics.
Absolutely. And now that you said that, I would also like your assessment on this. Now, reports suggest that over 25 Liberal MPs, they signed a document recently calling for Trudeau's ouster. And not even the polls, the Canadian polls. Now, this is a report by CBC. These polls, they don't really show a lot of support for Trudeau. They show Liberals getting 22% majority there in their opinion polls. What is your assessment? Is this the last kind of ditch effort by Trudeau to garner support from specific sections in Canada to retain power?
I wish he had such a sophisticated plan. I don't think he has any plan at all. I don't think he has any grand design to alter the arc of Canadian politics. I don't think it can be altered. I think he is toast in Canada. That is to say that there will be an election due next year. I don't think he can survive it. I think he's finished. And that's the traditional, your time is up after a certain period of time, usually about 9 years for some reason. Harper, Chrétien, these prime ministers all seem to last less than a decade before maybe you just get tired of them and want something new. And that's what is happening to Trudeau. I don't expect him Prime Minister when this fracas between India and Canada is finally resolved, if it ever is. I think Trudeau is not doing this because he thinks it will politically and that he'll somehow survive. Canadians barely follow these matters. Canadians were polled recently about the worst terrorist incident in Canadian history, the Air India bombing of 1985. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what the pollsters were talking about. That's how much interest Canadians have traditionally taken in what they see as somebody else's problem. It's an Indian problem. It's a problem for the other side of the world, not our affair. And I don't expect that to change. I don't think Trudeau believes that he is going to script, as I say. I think that he probably knows that he's toast and he wants to go out in a blaze of glory as standing for the integrity of Canadian sovereignty, defying any foreign power that wants to come here, take Canadian law, and carry out murders and assassinations in Canada on Canadian soil.
Mr. Miliuski,
he sees that as a fine point of principle, and he's going to stand on it.
I hear your point. Mr. Miliuski, with the respective high commissioners returning to their respective countries soon now, where do you see the India-Canada ties heading from here? Is this rock bottom? Does it go further from here?
Well, I think it may even get worse. I said before that how can it get worse? And then it did get worse. It's probably going to get worse still before it gets better. But there are reasons to think that there's going to be an end to it. What I mean is about two trials, two criminal trials. The first is that of Nikhil Gupta, who's been extradited from Czechoslovakia, now sits in an American jail, awaiting trial on the FBI, the Department of Justice in the United States, brought a lengthy indictment of which you've heard against Gupta as being the alleged handler on behalf of certain high officials of the intelligence services in India, and engineered a plot to hire gangsters to go out and kill Gopal Singh Noon of Sikhs for Justice, and also Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, as he was assassinated in September of last year. So that trial will tell us whether indeed it was real. That's the trial's job, sort out facts from spin. And we may find out that it was all true, or we may find out that it was all an illusion. Then the other trial that we have to watch is that of the four goons that were hired to kill Nijjar. Were they paid by somebody like Nikhil Gupta? Were they paid by someone acting on behalf of the Indian government? Remember that there's there are some differences between the American and Canadian approach. The Americans more subtle, more clever, I would argue, because they didn't directly point the finger at the Indian government. You did this murder. They said, well, he was an employee of the Indian government, not the Indian government. Whereas Trudeau got up and made a fine speech and accused the Indian government of the whole thing. So the Americans have left the Indians some wiggle room. There's room, I think, for a creative settlement, a quiet deal between the Americans and the Canadians and the Indians. Say, look, it's been a nasty business. Everybody did their share of stupid things. And as long as we have some accountability for the murder of Nijar, and India promises to play nice and not do anything like that again, and we'll sweep it under the rug.
Well, and all this, of course, as the Indian government still awaits evidence, which it still continues to suggest that there is not a shred of evidence which has been provided by the Canadian authorities. Yet, of course, those are differing accounts. Those are differing accounts from the two countries. Of course, we'll need to wait and watch what comes next. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Terry Mili joining us live on World DNA.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on, we'll next go to China, which is escalating its military presence around Taiwan, sending clear message of aggression and intimidation.
Of course, along with this, in a blatant display of force, the Chinese military has concluded fresh drills involving fighter jets and warships. Our next story explains how these drills mark a significant escalation in tensions between the two sides. Take a look at this report.
A menacing display of military power. China deploys a staggering 125 military aircraft and 17 warships around Taiwan. These war machines are a chilling new round of military exercises across 9 strategic zones near the island, including the critical Taiwan Strait. Beijing's message is clear. These maneuvers, aimed at assaulting maritime and ground targets, are a stark warning to Taipei and a brutal reminder of China's claim over the island. Taiwan independence and peace in the Taiwan Strait are irreconcilable. The provocations from pro-independence forces will inevitably face countermeasures. The drills, named Joint Sword 2024B, showcase China's military might as it tests the full spectrum of its joint combat capabilities. The aggressive military drills have left Taiwan on high alert while keeping its allies on edge.
In terms of deployment, we used one patrol vessel with one patrol boat, adopting a 2-on-1 approach to control the movements of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels throughout the whole process.
Chinese fleets are encircling the island in an intimidating clockwise movement, positioning themselves as a constant looming threat. China has increased the frequency of its warplane incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone, a move that underscores Beijing's growing readiness to trigger potential conflict.
Exercises to the south of the island aimed to strike at the heart of Taiwan independence forces. Those in the eastern air and sea zones were intended to block 3 critical routes: the lifeline for energy imports, external support line for separatists, and escape lines for those attempting to evade punishment.
Since President Lai Ching-te assumed office in May, he has stood firm on Taiwan's sovereignty, a stance that has inflamed Beijing. The latest drills mark China's 4th large-scale show of force in just 2 years, with Beijing bluntly declaring that Taiwan's independence and peace are irreconcilable. As the aggressive exercises unfold, China's intentions are clear. It is prepared to act and willing to escalate. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, moving to other global news, Australia has launched a new work and holiday visa program for Indian citizens.
They're allowing up to 1,000 eligible applicants per year, operationalized under the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. The program aims to enhance bilateral ties and mobility between the two nations.
Starting this month, Indian working holiday makers can visit Australia for a year, exploring short-term work and study opportunities while holidaying. Eligible applicants must be between 18 to 30 years old. According to reports, the new visa program has seen nearly 40,000 Indian applications in just 2 weeks.
The visa ballot process that opened on October 1st will close by month end, after which successful candidates will be randomly selected. Candidates can begin their stay in Australia early next year, and the Australian government has implemented a visa ballot system to manage high demand that also includes applicants from China and Vietnam. Following India's official entry into the program on September 16th this year, it became the 50th partner country in the Working Holiday Maker Initiative. The attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD, is typically thought of as a childhood condition.
But a study shows that 1 in 4 or 25% of adults in America suspect they may have it, but is undiagnosed. The study is based on a national survey of 1,000 American adults. The study revealed that social media videos help these adults to realize their difficulties with attention, focus, and restlessness. And this could, in fact, be undiagnosed ADHD. Worryingly, only 13% of survey respondents shared their concerns with their doctors. This, in turn, raises concerns about the consequences of self-diagnosis leading to treatment, the researchers said.
With more and more discussions around mental health and ADHD, a popular Indian actor, Alia Bhatt, also revealed that she struggles to be present in the moment in her fight against ADHD. Back in September, the Bollywood actor revealed that she had been diagnosed with ADHD, and since childhood, she used to get lost in the middle of the conversation. And until the diagnosis, she was not aware of the condition. ADHD is one of the most common mental disorders. Symptoms of this include inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. It is known to impact an individual's personal and professional life as it affects interpersonal relationships and daily functioning.
In children, if not treated, it can lead to poor self-esteem and social functioning. In adults, they might experience poor self-worth, sensitivity towards criticism, and increased self-criticism. And it's time now for a quick break, but don't go anywhere.
Lots more on the other side, of course. This is World DNA. The campaign phase for the Japan general elections begins from today. Over 1,000 candidates have kicked off their campaign for the snap polls to be held on the 27th of October.
Also on the other side, with just over 3 weeks to go for the U.S. presidential election, Vice President Kamala Harris is set to sit down for an interview with Fox News. We'll get you the latest on that on the other side.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I should push myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with Jyotsna and I'm Shivan. Lots to discuss on this side of the show as well. Let's get started with the headlines.
India's Tamil Nadu state government orders holiday for schools and colleges in 4 districts today in view of heavy rain predicted for next 4 days.
Suicide bombers dressed as women in burqas kill 4 people at remote police base in Pakistan. This as Islamabad is under strict security lockdown ahead of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
India-Canada diplomatic face-off escalates in Niger case. New Delhi expels 6 Canadian diplomats, recalls its High Commissioner and key diplomats from Canada.
United Nations peacekeepers to stay in all positions in Lebanon despite Israeli calls for them to move.
More than 20 people killed in an Israeli airstrike on city of Aito on northern Lebanon, says Lebanese health officials. First such strike in northern part of Lebanon.
European Union imposes sanctions against prominent Iranian officials and entities over transfer of missiles and drones for Russia to use against Ukraine.
The Nigerian national football team will boycott their 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier in Libya. Their squad claims they were subjected to inhumane treatment at an airport in Libya. The campaign phase for the Japan general elections begins from today.
Over 1,000 candidates have kicked off their campaign for the snap polls on October 27th, and they will get 12 days to present their case to the public.
A total of 465 parliamentary seats are up for grabs in the general election, out of which 289 seats will be from single-seat districts, while 176 will be elected through a system of proportional representation. A minimum of 233 seats are required for the majority in the lower house. The ruling coalition government had 288 seats at the time when Prime Minister Ishiba dissolved the parliament and called for early polls.
Before the dissolution of the 465-member lower house, the ruling LDP decided to endorse a total of 279 official candidates.
Now, 265 in single-seat districts and 14 of the proportional representations section. Now, Japan's leading opposition parties, Constitutional Democratic Party and Japanese Communist Party, are planning to field 200 and 210 candidates respectively. The two parties, who formed an electoral alliance in the previous lower house election, will likely lock horns with each other in some 140 constituencies in this upcoming polls.
All right, for more on this, our correspondent Chris Gilbert joins us from Tokyo. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. As the election campaign starts in Japan, give us a sense of, what's the mood on ground. Of course, the next 12 days are going to be rather eventful. Give us a better understanding of what's happening there.
Yeah, so the mood is rather split between politicians and the public. If you ask the politicians what the mood is, well, the ruling party says that they're looking to do their best, although they understand there are some tough challenges ahead because, they are struggling to move on from a number of funding scandals that have dogged the ruling party over the last year, although the ruling LDP is certainly no stranger to corruption and scandals. The opposition CDP, the Constitutional Democrats, are going to be looking to make the most of this. However, the argument against them is that, the LDP have really been in power continuously since 1955, apart from 3 years at the end of the 2000s. And so there are questions about whether the CDP, the opposition, can form a legitimate alternative functional government. And so that is the conversation that's being had at the political level. At the public level is a little bit different. While 65% of recent respondents to a recent Kyoto News poll said they would consider the fundraising scandal, the funding scandal by the LDP when they vote on October 27th, a greater number of people actually said they're far more concerned about the state of the economy. And while, on paper things may look good, the stock exchange has hit record highs this year, the yen has made some moves towards strengthening, that hasn't really translated into the everyday experience of everyday people who have noticed their prices go up again in August and September of about 3,000 or 4,000 products as import costs continue to bite. They're noticing that their utilities are still more expensive than they have been probably in their lifetimes, and they're looking to the government to do something. And so while the government of the previous Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, was very unpopular, this Prime Minister and his cabinet, Shigeru Ishiba, are new, and so a lot is yet to be seen about what their chances of success are going to be.
Right. And I see that you gave us a sense of what are the key agendas that people are going to think of going to the elections. I see some posters behind you. So if you could give us a sense of the popular candidates maybe to look out for in this snap election?
Yeah, so there are about 465 lower house seats up for grabs, and here we have the main opposition party, the CDP poster for this local constituency here. We have the LDP poster, and more and more these are going to become more and more ubiquitous throughout Tokyo and Japan. In the 12-day election campaign period, it's a very short window for campaigning, and in Japan, it's also very common for them to, sit in vans with loudspeakers on the top and drive around the streets campaigning through loudspeakers. And so that is going to be the mood on the street at the moment. Now, the opposition parties are hoping that they can form a united bloc. And it's not just the CDP, it's also the Communist Party, the People's Innovation Party, and a number of others. They have to strategize because some of the seats that are up for grabs are directly elected by constituencies, whereas a minority of the seats that are up for grabs are elected by proportional representation, which means, someone's vote goes straight to a party. So the opposition needs to strategize by running one candidate and not compete against each other and splitting the vote in those, electorate seats. That's really important if they're going to have any chance at beating the LDP and their junior coalition partner, Komeito. They have a very modest goal. At the moment, out of the current parliament, which was just dissolved, they had 288 seats together. That's two parties together. They have a goal of just a simple majority now of 233. So they are expecting to lose seats. So there is an opportunity, some media is reporting here in Japan, for the opposition parties to really unite, to organize, and to effectively punch the LDP while they're down over these funding scandals that have plagued them over the last year.
Well, the next 12 days will tell us how much of that opportunity they're able to grab. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Chris Gilbert joining us from Tokyo.
Right, moving on, in Pakistan, suicide bombers dressed as women in burqas killed 4 people as they stormed a remote police base where a funeral was being held.
And this, as capital Islamabad is under strict security lockdown ahead of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit this week. The government has announced a 3-day public holiday in Islamabad with schools and businesses shut and large contingents of police and paramilitary forces deployed.
The security has been beefed up as Chinese Premier Li Qiang landed in the city. Li's visit is the first by a Chinese premier to Pakistan in 11 years. In a departure from protocol, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif himself went to the airport to receive the Chinese dignitary. Upon arrival, the Chinese premier was given a 21-gun salute at the Nur Khan Air Base.
Chiang and Sharif held delegation-level targets of violence from separatist militants. The threat alert has been high, especially after the killing of 2 Chinese engineers and the shooting of 21 miners.
Right, and talk about the recent incident. Terrorists stormed a northwestern Pakistani district police office on Monday, killing 3 policemen and a civilian before police shot and killed all 5 attackers. The complex, which houses both the district police headquarters and a residential complex, lasted for hours before all the 5 suicide bombers were killed. The incident occurred in District Bannu, which borders the rest of North Waziristan tribal region on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Islamist militant group Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan claimed responsibility for the attack.
Meanwhile, the Pakistan government has accepted the demand for medical examination of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party postponed its planned protest at Islamabad's D Chowk today, which has threatened to disrupt the gathering for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit.
The 23rd meeting of the SCO, which comprises 9 full members including China, India, Iran and Russia, is scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday in Islamabad. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is scheduled to reach Pakistan on Tuesday evening and may participate in a welcome dinner hosted by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif for the delegates. Jaishankar's upcoming visit will be the first by an Indian foreign minister in almost 10 years.
Pakistan, sir? Huh? All safe for Pakistan? Well, it's still 24 hours to go.
The White House race is on a knife edge with just over 3 weeks to go.
Now here's the latest details related to the U.S. presidential elections. Vice President Kamala Harris's marginal advantage over the Republican former President Donald Trump in the polls has eroded in recent days. In a rare move, Harris will also sit down for an interview with Trump-friendly Fox News on Wednesday to reach out to undecided right-leaning voters put off by the former president and counter Republican claims that she is avoiding media scrutiny. Harris has recently lost ground, in particular among black men, a key demographic that helped Joe Biden beat Trump in 2020. And on Monday, she launched a new economic plan to court them.
In a bid to secure support from African American voters, Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris unveiled a new policy aimed to woo black male voters in the U.S. The policy includes provisions that forgive loans for small business and create access for a new legal recreational marijuana industry. Details reveal that 1 million loans up to $20,000 will be fully forgivable in underserved communities. The policy comes as a move to solidify support from African American men for Kamala Harris after concerns emerged in the Democratic camp.
Donald Trump's lawyers have pushed to transfer to federal court the case in which he was convicted on charges involving covering up hush money paid to porn star. Now, this move would give him the ability to end the prosecution if he regains the presidency. In their brief, Trump's lawyers cited the U.S. Supreme Court's decision that former presidents cannot be prosecuted for official actions taken in office. In the hush money case, they said jurors had improperly seen evidence of Trump's official acts as president.
In a media interview on Sunday, Republican leader Donald Trump slammed Biden's statement on the election day not being peaceful. The Red Camp presidential nominee said that the real threat comes from within the country.